Welcome back to the show. Today we've got something that is properly serious and will actually impact you directly. Now, you know the way we had lots of publishers, the likes of, say, Embracer Group, just gobbling up loads and loads of game studios, but then whenever the financial state of things got a little bit worse, interest rates went a little bit higher, things changed in the economy, guess what happened? A lot of those studios just got killed. A lot of studios that were custodians of IPs that we really have enjoyed, where there was a hell of a lot of potential. So that was a hell of a lot of damage done to our industry and a lot of brain drain. A lot of people who will be going elsewhere, meaning that we will not get them working in games that we can play. A similar thing is going on in another segment, and I'm just going to start this off with a quote. I worry that, now that the machine has increased in size, it will necessarily crush my most talented peers from the network into writing boring SEO-focused things designed to appeal to the averaged-out reader. But people aren't average, so when you try to appeal to the average, you end up appealing to nobody. Now, those are the words of the ex-Rock Paper Shotgun editor Alice Bell. She was speaking to Aftermath in a piece that was about layoffs that have happened in the wake of essentially IGN gobbling up loads and loads of the game press. Loads of them. It's kind of crazy. And what this means is you, the audience, are not going to be served here. The readerships of those sites are not going to be served. These places are getting gutted, and that means you're going to be getting desperate, shitty content rather than good journalism. And let's be real, it's already hard enough to get good journalism out there, especially in games, right? When everything just ends up being, you know, maybe rage bait stuff or just loads and loads and loads of SEO optimized guides and just all of that sludge. So today we're going to go through this story and take a look at the wider ecosystem here, how you are being failed by the interests of a few powerful people and the degenerate incentives that basically rule their actions. And part of what is driving this is a fundamental change in the ad market. That's something I'll get to later on in this video, but straight up, it is why, rather than relying just on YouTube, we are building Bellular.games, right? Our own site, our own place. And over there, you can get access to all of our reports, like the actual written reports, stuff before I see it, right? You'll get all of our videos ad-free. You'll get them early, like as soon as we make them, they're up there. Our daily newsletter loading screen, which covers far more stories than actually make it onto the channel, as well as game launches as they happen. And it allows me basically to invest and grow in the team here to actually make all of this happen, and so that our content can be better and more reliable for you. So Bellular.games is the best way to, I suppose, join up and help us with the mission. And with that said, let's just go through this hellscape together. So last night, IGN Entertainment, which is the corporate subsidiary of Ziff Davis that owns IGN, Map Genie, How Long to Beat, and Humble Bundle, bought the Gamer Network. The Gamer Network owned loads and loads of sites. Now, this has been talked about for a while. Some stuff went on sale months ago with gamers. The outlets that this covers, though, right? GameIndustry.biz, Rock Paper Shotgun, Eurogamer, and Eurogamer, like they're affiliated with Digital Foundry, so I believe this does impact the Digital Foundry group as well. Now, I'm pretty sure they have a decent level of like financial independence and stability, but suffice to say, if anything bad happens to the Digital Foundry people, that would be a humongous loss for consumers, because come on, the value that they provide in doing all of that technical testing is absolutely massive. Other groups covered, though, include Dicebreaker and VG247, who are all purchased from ReedPop. And this is alongside, of course, the partial interests in Outside Xbox, Digital Foundry, and the Hookshot group that covers Nintendo Life, Push Square, Pure Xbox, and Time Extension. That's a lot of sites, everyone, and looking at the site rankings from SimilarWeb, what this means is that Ziff Davis added 100 million visitors per month to their portfolio of game sites, which is a pretty crazy thing. And again, this is in an industry where IGN was already comfortably the largest player in the space. Now, the idea, right, that basically the people who own IGN, right, the media outlet, that they then gobble up a whole bunch of other sites and then gut them, I mean, that is obviously going to be bad. Essentially, the squeeze is getting worse and worse. And this is not the first time that IGN have went on an acquisition spree. As an example, they purchased OneUp.com, and that did not end up going well. From people who worked there, they basically said it was very much added to the portfolio, stripped for parts, not much effort going into actually maintaining content, then of course, gets shut down, and it just ended up being an overall shit show. Again, where the reader and the staff lose. Now, for the reader to lose, the staff have first got to lose, and well, that was kind of rough. Staff were immediately laid off at a number of the purchased sites before the sale was even announced, and in a few cases, this is decade-spanning veterans of the medium. As an example, Brendan Sinclair of GameIndustry.biz, Stephanie Nunley-Jackson of VG247, Alice Bell of Rock Paper Shotgun, who at the time of writing was the only editorial leader on that site, and it is kind of rough. I mean, RPS, I certainly remember a few sort of odd, let's just say, articles that came out from them in the past, and really for a lot of these outlets. But like in the case of RPS, a little bit of that is what made them different, and as much as there would be times they'd rub me the wrong way, I mean, there was times where actually their stuff would resonate pretty well. Like, they had more of an edge. They felt different. They did actually feel like they had a bit of an editorial voice, and I think that, that's just the sort of thing that we lose. We lose that, like, diversity of, different places with different experiences and different takes on things, and it all just gets turned into the IGN corporate blob. Do we want everything to be the IGN corporate blob? I think no, actually, we don't. So as you can see, that's rough stuff impacting like proper, industry vets who've been here for a long ass time. Now, again, speaking to Aftermath, Bell said that the scale of the cuts is currently unclear to the public. Here's the quote from her. The network has lost a lot of phenomenally talented people, both in front-facing editorial and more behind-the-scenes roles. It looks like at least one person from almost any department at a company like this, you can imagine, got some bad news today. So basically, a very, very, very large number of layoffs. And that is actually, it's pretty rough proportionately, because you might look at a lot of these sites and perhaps you recognize the name of a publication because it's been there for years. But the shocking thing often is that just ends up being like 5 or 6 people. Like, they are surprisingly small. And to be honest, it always had been a little bit of a shitty industry to work in. I mean, yes, games had its own problems. I know, though, that there's a bit of perhaps a saying that there are some journalism-related jobs that basically you have to be rich enough to afford to take such a shitty underpaid job. I think a lot of that was people maybe, having to move to New York to work for Vice, who would pay them no money, and then you kind of wonder, oh, how did Vice completely run itself into the ground and become a bit of a laughingstock? Now, the landscape then of games media is left in a very rocky place after this. There's a lot of people in the audience and the C-suites arguing that audiences should be getting their news from personalities, reading documents on Twitch, or on YouTube, or TikTok, or maybe by searching for an AI-generated summary. And that is a short-sighted thing. Now, the idea of Twitch streamer reading some articles they find interesting with their audience, totally cool. I mean, a lot of what we do here is aggregating news from lots of different sources and kind of synthesizing it into one thing. But do you know what's going to be a little bit troublesome? When a lot of that original reporting doesn't actually happen anymore. Because without the journalism going on, well, who's creating the document that Asmongold reacts to, or that, some juicy new report that maybe Yongya's doing a video on? I mean, if those sites don't exist, or they are basically just reposting press releases, well, guess what? You're not going to get those stories. As an example, look at all of the reporting into why Anthem was so much of a shit show. And of course, that also extended to Dragon Age stuff and Mass Effect stuff. That's because you had people who had been working in this industry in the press side for years who had cultivated contacts at those companies, meaning they could get people to actually tell them what's actually going on. So that then us, the consumers, well, we maybe know, don't trust EA's bullshit when it comes to Anthem. Right? I mean, obviously, Anthem, old news, but I think you get the point. And one of the particularly challenging things here is AI is impactful on multiple fronts. Number one, right? Do you want articles that are just an AI processing a press release or an AI scraping Reddit? Like, no, we don't want that. I mean, hey, the AIs can hallucinate, just straight up make up facts and confidently say that they're facts. That can be a problem. It still is a problem, even in, say, GPT 4.0, like the latest version of it, right? That stuff can be a problem. But of course, for a lot of the people who are going to be purchasing these sites and then gutting them and stripping them for parts, they don't necessarily care as much about those things because all that they are doing is managing an asset. They don't necessarily care about the mission of that asset and why people would choose to have a job at that asset. But then there's the other front, how Google is literally killing countless websites because what Google wants to do, and it's even their new mission statement, it is to organize the world's information. And what that means is you write a blog post, you do something in Reddit. I mean, hey, even I think there's a new like partnership between OpenAI and Reddit, I think. But basically, they want to do that so that whenever you Google something, you get an AI generated response that will be based on that AI scraping Reddit, scraping game sites, maybe scraping YouTube videos. And what that then means is, well, Google has you on their page with their advertisements, with content that their AI has scraped from other people, where those other people, they'll have no real way of getting paid or anything like that, which then means that the things that they do, well, that's just going to be financially, unsustainable. And even if you say, oh, it should just be done, by hobbyists for passion. Well, even if that is the case, it's pretty bad if Google just comes in and makes a shitload of money off people's work. This is just bad on every level. And that brings us to essentially the games media landscape. So there are 16 companies who own the vast majority of the games press, and I'm just going to go through them real quick. You have IGN Entertainment. That, of course, is IGN, GameIndustry.biz, Eurogamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, VG247, Dicebreaker. Then there's Fandom, right? They own Giant Bomb, Fanatical, GameFAQs, Metacritic, and of course, Fandom have, they've probably been responsible for ruining a wiki that you find interesting. Very recently, the big World of Warcraft wiki, they moved to wiki.gg because it's not pulling the bullshit that Fandom is doing on their wikis. Like, if you go to, say, like a Fallout wiki and it's a Fandom ran one, you're just going to be assaulted with ads, and it sucks. The next group then is Future PLC. They are Edge, Games Radar Plus, PC Gamer Play, Retro Gamer, Tech Radar, Totally Game. Then there is GameStop, the store, who of course own Game Informer. There's Valnet, who you probably haven't heard of, but they own The Gamer, DualShockers, Hardcore Gamer, and Game Rant. There's Network N, who have PC Games N, Wargamer, Strategy Gamer, and Pocket Tactics. Condé Nast own Wired and Ars Technica, which I guess isn't really gaming. Vox Media, of course, have Verge for tech, and Polygon, which is their games vertical. Then there's Geo Media, who own Gizmodo and Kotaku. And trust me, we're almost there. Hookshot, of course, Nintendo Life, Push Square, Pure Xbox Time Extension, and Gamers. Gamers absolutely suck. They were very much caught trying to do AI stuff. They own the likes of Dot Esports, Pure Game Guides, GameBird, Twinfinite, Prima Games, a whole bunch of other ones, the Mary Sue, Destructoid, PC Invasion, Upcomer, Escapist. So you know the way Yahtzee and all the people involved in the videos for the Escapists, you know the way they left and formed Second Wind? Well, that's actually because of bullshit with gamers. And then there's Yahoo, who have got Engadget and TechCrunch, which aren't really games. There's Steel Media, who are a bunch of mobile sites. BGFC, I think the main one that you'd know from them maybe is like Video Gamer, but they're smaller ones, at least in my own personal orbit. And Mobifire, who are very much like individual game, like guide and coverage sites. And then, of course, you do have the independents. VGC, Video Games Chronicle, they're awesome. We'll talk about them later. Digital Trends Aftermath. Aftermath, again, was formed by people who left one of the big corporately owned companies. RPG site Insider Gaming, Digital Foundry, TechRaptor, Game World Observer, Gamatsu, Dexerto, as an example. So that's like the lay of the land. I mean, you do have maybe Washington Post. They have Gene Park writing things for them. There's BBC Newsbeat, who sometimes do games, but they're not really particularly important here. And if you're like the games vertical of something not interested in games, like say Washington Post and Launcher, where they just gutted that, you're of course not really safe. So that's basically what you've got. Real big industry spanning sites that cover everything and have got resources to just do a crazy amount of stuff. And then you've got those like collective groups that own, plenty of individual sites. And this isn't really some sort of conspiracy thing where like a narrative is as much being controlled or manipulated. Obviously, there are times where if you have a bunch of people who work in the same field and who all talk to each other, you can definitely have like a degree of I guess, more similar opinions because, small group of people talking to each other in the same field, if you get what I mean. But it's, I think, far more that these overarching companies, they could not give a damn about what is being published. All they care about is advertising revenue. The articles, they're just generic widgets, right? They don't matter. And in many cases, a lot of these companies ended up banding together in order to survive, being able to therefore share things like backend staff, legal, site maintenance, as well as advertising network contacts. And with that, we got to talk about advertising stuff, because there is another angle to this. Gamer Network are not just a set of websites, they're also an advertising network, and it's a pretty successful one. It supports the Hookshot Group and even VGC. So VGC, yes, is an independent site. However, it's working with that advertising network, which does mean that they are exposed to a degree of risk there. That's an advertising network that is now controlled by the biggest player in the space, who have now got less of an incentive to support their smaller competitors, right? That's why, you have Hookshot people tweeting, you've got Andy Robinson of VGC basically saying, would you support a VGC Patreon? If so, what sorts of things would you like on it? Because obviously, this consolidation is kind of spooky. It's off-putting. So those smaller groups are absolutely going to be worried about their fundamental financial viability. And when you look at those larger companies, there's a very clear reason why we end up seeing so much guide content. Ultimately, it is about optimizing advertising. There is always going to be somebody saying, Googling, how do I unlock X gun in Call of Duty? How do I do this challenge? How do I unlock, bunny ears in Resident Evil 4 or something in Stellar Blade? That is going to be Googled, and that is why guide content is absolutely massive. IGN have an entire division to do it. Yet even that side of things is still a threat because of how Google can pull the rug out and just pull everything onto their own search page. You can see the fear there, and it's because if you are working in the realm of the written word, it is genuinely hard to survive on advertising. That is why guide content is so relevant to long-term health for so many of these sites. There will always be somebody like Googling, how do I get this costume in Stellar Blade? How do I unlock this gun in Call of Duty? That will always be happening. That is why we're seeing so many guides. But now, of course, Google are even pulling the rug out there. And that means that companies are scrambling to find other ways to ensure their ad revenue can go up. And this is important because Google has been spending the last few years tinkering around with their search engine. And I'm sure you felt it. Like, the way you just used to Google something and you'd get relevant results? The way relevancy has been going down? The way even on YouTube, you try to search for something, and by the time you've scrolled through 3 videos, it's somehow drifted onto an entirely different topic than the thing you searched for. And as for Google, well, a lot of them doing this is to highlight their AI stuff, which they, of course, want you to be interested in. They also want to keep you on Google. They don't want their search engine to bring you to a website. They want their search engine to pull the information you want from a website so that they can still get sponsored link money and all of that stuff that is on a Google page. But, obviously don't click you through to the website of the people who, actually did the work and made the info that their AI has just scraped. And of course, how often does the AI just simply get it wrong? Obviously, a hell of a lot of the time. And it's rough because all of this is happening after companies have spent years jumping through all of Google's hoops to be SEO optimized, right? Like, that has been the only way to survive for years. And again, this is surviving at the level where you can hire people and run a proper outfit. Obviously, if it's a personal blog, if it's a smaller site, sure, fine. But that's not going to be able to replace what some of these groups actually do within the industry. And so with that, we're in a rough situation where there in a way is value in the consolidation for the kind of corporations owning this stuff. Like, if a story is on the front page of IGN, Eurogamer, VG247, and Rock Paper Shotgun, then Ziff Davis, regardless, will win. And of course, those are sites that are generally seen to be, when I say respected sources, I mean respected by the search engine. You think whatever you want, but by the search engine, by like the trust rankings that's something like Google will have. And that's because while 100% they do optimize for search, they're not in the same league as any of the AI slop sites that have given rise to the likes of Glorbo, right? Glorbo obviously failed because it was so easy to just troll Glorbo, but you do know that in 1 or 2 years, absolutely they'll be trying that shit again, probably sooner. And in a lot of cases, as we saw with fandom and gamers, and even more in the last few years, these companies have been sold to private equity firms or some, uncaring corporate behemoth that literally doesn't care. To them, the people aren't relevant, but of course, the people are the ones who actually make the content, right? That's the fundamental misunderstanding that happens here. Yet to these sites, if they can just replace a senior salary with a newcomer who will take an even lower wage, then guess what? In terms of SEO, in terms of the trust ranking of their site, in terms of all the stuff of their ad network, nothing will change. The only thing that they will see is lower payroll. Happy, the brand continues. But because the experience is lost, the actual quality of the work is gone. And worse than that, the positive feedback loops that lead to improvement also go. Because guess what? If you're new in a job, but you're working under an experienced editor who can actually help you become better at your profession, that's great. That's training up the next generation. That, of course, will not happen in a land where everybody is just a totally replaceable gig worker, which is essentially where we're going. Now, is there a way out of this? Well, you can be independent and succeed. Dexerto is independent, and by the metrics that we've looked at, I mean, they're very nearly in the top 10 of sites. They obviously play SEO like a fiddle. If Asmongold sneezes, there'll probably be a Dexerto article about it, right? Like they really leaned into Twitch drama for a bit there, and I think that clearly worked for them. You've got the likes of RPG Site leaning into a niche and growing within that, which is great. And there are more general sites like VGC, albeit it is rather rare, but they can survive while being independent and still trying to cover the three big pillars of news reporting, criticism, and more like in-depth investigative stuff. But again, they are still exposed to the ad network that has just been sold. Ziff. Please don't ruin everything, Ziff. And then, of course, you got the likes of Aftermath and Second Wind, right? That's people who have left those big sites and who are doing their own thing. And I think what is strong there is they're more free to just be themselves. And I know that for many viewers, that might actually make them distasteful. However, what it does mean is that to the people who enjoy their editorial voice, they actually get the pure thing that they want. And the more that this happens, the more that we can all find groups who, who we vibe with, who are going independent. That's why I think it is a really important thing. Now, there's also the likes of Stephen Totillo, right? Nathan Brown. They do Gamefile and Hit Points. That's basically both newsletters. And they're churning out some really great journalistic work on those. I mean, hey, we're even doing Loading Screen, and ideally we'd like to slowly grow that over time. The thing about all of these groups, be it Aftermath, Second Wind, Stephen Totillo, these are long-term industry veterans with established followings. Now they have to be a bit smaller, and it will be harder for them to train up new voices. And they literally don't have the capacity to fill every single niche of interests, or even just to cover every story. It's why, even for us doing nearly daily videos here, and doing Loading Screen, and then publishing reports sometimes that are things that don't end up being videos, there is still so much news. So to be able to cover all of that news requires infrastructure and staff counts, like what you see with IGN, Dexerto, or PC Gamer. Either that or loads of smaller outlets that in aggregate are, sort of doing that for whatever niche that they're specializing in. But again, the problem there is that this whole industry is built atop of advertising, and Google is literally murdering everything that isn't their own advertisements because they're trying to pull everything onto the Google homepage or, the Google search page with AI, right? Now, there is new media, YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, but we are not a perfect replacement for these layoffs. We're not a replacement for the industry consolidation. There are people who are sort of journalistically trained, the likes of, say, People Make Games, people who have developed really well in their own critical space, like Skill Up or Mandalore. You've got interviews from NoClip, but the thing is, that's kind of the exception, not the rule. And I think YouTube is becoming in many ways a harder place to actually get noticed on. Things are challenging, and you are far more at the whims of the overall platform. Very much YouTube is not a place where you, to sort of use an industry term, own your audience. Because subscriptions basically mean nothing now. And again, there's the capacity of a proper report happening somewhere, maybe like myself, Yongya, people talking about that. Well, guess what? If the sites that employ the people who have got the sources at those companies are getting gutted, then guess what? Well, we don't have those articles. Punditry is great as a balanced diet, but you do actually need more. And remember, editorial is not just spell checking. Generally, that's experienced people who are guiding writers to do better versions of stories, who, have got knowledge, who have got contacts in the industry to pull quotes from. Again, there are many times where somebody working on the news beat, but they'll know their editor has a few sources. They might be able to talk to their editor who's maybe been in the industry for 15 years and knows people deep in companies. Like, that's the kind of thing that we're actually losing, that the corporate owners do not understand. And again, the 3 individuals most publicly let go by IGN, they represent that perfectly. What I'm talking about here is the literal foundations of so much of what all of us do being eroded, right? Most of what we do is story aggregation. And yes, there are times that we get stories through our tips email, or we find something ourselves and are able to report directly, but we just literally do not have the resources to do more. And the setup that we do have relies pretty heavily on there being a strong enough press who are doing lots of that bread and butter journalistic work. And yes, it's not always perfect. Yes, there can be cultural commentary or whatever. There can be a bit of an eye roll or whatever. But again, there is that core bread and butter of news being surfaced, of sources, of sources being asked things. Like, that is the important thing that we risk losing. We're about to go into the summer showcase season where the industry will be rushing to show off all of the newest titles in the best light possible, of course, after a year and a bit of brutal layoffs for people actually making games. So we're about to enter a period where there is a lot of value in the press. The press has been severely damaged. This consolidation and reduction in staff, reduction in experience will hurt us. It will mean less staff reporting with less experience, trying to hold an industry to account and criticize what they see, of course, with everything that allows them to do that being eroded and damaged. And to return to where we started with Alice Bell being interviewed by Aftermath, just a good quote. I'm most worried about people's livelihoods, but I'm also very worried that they won't be allowed to be weird and write thoughtful, critical things. I worry that now that the machine is increased in size, it will necessarily crush my most talented peers from the network into writing boring, SEO-focused things designed to appeal to the averaged-out reader. But people aren't average, so when you try to appeal to the average, you end up appealing to nobody. And that, everybody, is the problem. Whew, big long story. Let me know what you think if you've been impacted by these layoffs. Absolutely do reach out. And I suppose if you have got thoughts on how we can basically make it through this, AI is going to take all of your work and surface it on Google's page so they can make money from it, but not you, then let me know, because I'm pretty sure that's a big iceberg that we're all careening towards really quickly. Don't you love big tech? That's it from me. See you next time.